The gyroid was discovered in the early 1970s by NASA engineer Alan Schoen. It is what is known in mathematics as a minimal surface, or a soap film surface. It has no planes of symmetry or straight lines, but is capable of extending periodically in 3 independent directions of world space. Alright, let's begin here by setting up the scene to use real-world scale units. I'll go to Customize and Unit Setup in case we want to 3D print this later. I'll use a display unit scale of millimeters and click on System Unit Setup and change the system unit scale to match that in millimeters. And then click OK and accept those parameters. Alright, so we'll begin here with a standard primitive. Click on Box under Standard Primitives and change the creation method from box to cube. And under the keyboard entry rollout, we'll change the length to 20 millimeters. And just by clicking in the next parameter box, all of the length, width, and height will change to 20 millimeters as well. And then just click Create. Once you click that, a perfect box will appear in the center of the screen. And I'll change my wire color to black here, and the default shading I will use the clay option just to see things a little better. Alright, so let's go here over to our box and we'll right click. Well, actually, let me change my vantage point here. I'm just clicking the little icon next to the view cube, and I'll change from perspective to orthographic and just situate my viewport a little bit by moving it out a little bit. Alright, and I'll center this up. So I'm looking at this through the orthographic vantage point. And then I'll go over here to our box and right click over the name, and I'll change it from editable poly to editable patch. Okay, so there it's changed. And I want to be looking at this at a 45-degree angle in ortho mode. Okay, and now I'm just enabling the patch sub-object selection. And I'll select the 3 patch faces that are closest to me. And I'll delete them. Just hit delete on the keyboard. Alright. So now we're left with this, and at this point I'll come down to the bottom and enable the absolute mode transform type in. Alright, and make sure your select and move is enabled, and then we'll go over here and enable the handle sub-object level. And then you see these Bezier-like handles appear at every vertex. I'm sorry. And we'll utilize these by changing the curvature of the object. So we'll go ahead and rectangular selection tool, and we'll just select these 2 handles on the outer edge. And down here in the Z parameter, we'll type in a value of -7. Alright, so just dash and then 7 and then hit enter, and you can see that that has bent the object along the border there. So we'll just go along the outside perimeter of the object, select the next 2 set of handles, and in the Y parameter this time we'll type in again -7 and hit enter. And that's given us a nice bend on that axis. And then we'll box select the next set of handles accordingly along the outer perimeter. And in the X parameter this time, we'll type in a positive value of just 7 and hit enter. Okay, so around we go here on the outside of the object. And we'll come back to the Z parameter this time. And again, we'll enter a +7 as our value and hit enter. And keep going around the outside object. This time on the Y parameter, we'll change that to, again, a +7. And lastly, on this side, we'll select those two handles. But this time in the X parameter, we'll use once again a negative value, so -7, and hit enter. All right, and that has bent the outside perimeter of our object accordingly. So we can exit the handle mode. And now down here under surface, make sure your view steps and render steps are both at 5. Okay, which is, I believe, is the default. All right, so we'll go back up here to our editable patch. We'll right click and we'll change it back to an editable polygon object. All right, editable poly. Now by doing that, we'll have a nice quadrilateral polygonal surface again. Okay, so now I'll add a modifier here. So bring up drop down and we'll bring up the relax modifier right on top. And we'll crank those iterations all the way up as high as they will go until there's no more effect happening on the object. And then we'll just collapse all because the modifier stack is about to get quite deep. So we might as well collapse it here. All right, so far this is the object that we have ended up with. All right, and this is just but one section that we need to generate our triply periodic gyroid object, or at least the section of it, the first section of it. Okay, so this will be the first step. All right, so I'm back in perspective mode, and I'm going to add a mirror modifier on top of this object. And the first thing I want to do here is I want to change the options to make sure I have a copy. So check the copy option. And then I'll bring up the mirror center, and I'll change the axis to Y. And I'll just move that mirror center out a little bit and line up these edges. Let's see if we go this way. We can line them up here at the top. Okay. But that's not the direction I want to go on both axes. So I'm going to change it to XY. So I flip the X-axis as well. All right, and I'm just going to line these up. So the mirror axis should be on XY for this first mirror. All right, now that looks good. We're going, we have a nice topology going on here with our two sub-objects. So I'll add another edit poly on top of that. I'll drop down to my element level, and I'll select the first object we started with. And again, I'll add another mirror modifier, remembering to check the copy option. All right, now I'll go up and open up the mirror center gizmo again, and we'll change the axis this time because we know we want to move it down on the Z axis. So for now, I'll just move it on the Z until it matches up. But we also need to flip it on a different axis. So let's try YZ, and that's the correct one right there. So this mirror modifier will use the YZ mirror axis. Okay, and this is what we have so far. Everything seems to be lining up and looking good. All right, now at this point you can see the gyroid is beginning to form. So we'll continue on with another edit poly modifier on the top of that. Same process. This time we'll select the newest copy that we just made. And we'll go ahead and add a mirror to it. And again, click copy. And we'll move it along the X-axis this time until it just touches. I mean, it doesn't have to be a perfect adjoinment. You can do that if you want to. Enable your snaps and get it perfectly adjoined here. But I'm just going to do it by eye right now. And we'll flip the other axis as well. We know we want it on the X, but we also need it on the Z. So this mirror will use the ZX axis. All right, and that looks correct. So our polyflow is looking good. I'm just going to tweak this alignment here a little bit. Get them to match up perfect. There we go. All right, so this is looking good. All right, so I'll add, again, another edit poly on top. Again, element mode, select the newest mirror sub-object. All right, the one we just created. And we'll go ahead and add another mirror onto that. And bring up the mirror center. And let's see, which direction do we need to go? I believe it'll be the Z. Don't forget to make your copy option and move it up on the Z. And let's see, what other axis do we need to flip here? All right, I think let's try ZX. And that does not look correct, but we know we need the Z. So let's see, there's only one other option. It's the YZ. All right, so this mirror will utilize the YZ axis. All right, so far so good here. That's looking correct. All right. Okay, so moving along. Same thing again, edit poly. And select the newest mirror element that we just created. And let's see what direction we'll need to go this time. Well, let's bring up a mirror modifier again and make a copy. And I believe it'll be the Y-axis this time as our first axis. Yes, that'll line up nicely. All right, now which other axis do we need here? Let's try the XY. And that matches up nicely. So it was the XY on this mirror. Okay. Let me see. So let's add another edit poly. Element mode, select the newest mirror object and add another mirror modifier. Switch on copy. This time we need to move it on the Z. We know that. So we'll move it down a little bit on the Z, line up the edges. All right. And now we'll decide what other axis we need. Let's try ZX. That doesn't look right, so it'll be YZ. All right. So this one will use YZ. I'll just tweak my alignment a little bit here with the mirror center. And that looks perfect. All right. So let's see. I'll just line this up here and add another edit poly. And I'll select that sub-object element. And I believe this will be our last one, so we'll do the same process. I think we need to, I'll try the x-axis here. All right, so it is the x-axis is our last one. And I'll flip it to the ZX. All right, and I'll just tweak it along the X here, line these edges up. All right, and there's a perfect fit with the ZX mirror axis. All right, so I believe we have our gyroid section completed here. If you look at it at the 45-degree angle, you can see all 6 arms emanating from the centerpiece. Let's add another edit poly. I want to flip these normals. All right, so I'm going to select everything. And I'll just click flip, and I'll flip those normals. All right. And At this point, I will go to border mode and just box select all of the border edges. Then I'll hold down Shift with those edges selected, and it will maintain the selection in our vertices. And then I'll hold down Shift while I bring up my Weld tool, and we'll just weld those selected vertices together. You should end up with 933 vertices on the object if the weld was successful. All right. Now this is all welded together as one object, and we have our gyroid section here now. Okay. This section is triply periodic, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment. All right. So I'll just add another relax modifier on top of here just to tweak these openings, and you'll see what I mean if I go to the front view here. You see these portholes in the gyroid. If we do not add a relax, they're kind of jagged, and so the relax will round them out a little bit better. So just the relax with about 48 iterations, and that'll round those holes out pretty nicely. All right, so we have a nice gyroid here, but you can see our topology is a little messed up here, where our vertices are coming to, our edges are coming together in several areas of the object to one single vertex. And if we go ahead and add a shell modifier at this point, it won't smooth correctly because of those. It'll pinch in those areas. So what I'm going to do is select all the borders once again, box select all the borders in border mode, and I'm going to change to my scale gizmo and use selection center. All right, and holding down Shift, I can scale out some new faces, some new polygons from that border selection, and just maybe 5% scale. You don't really need a lot there, but you can see that that corrects the topology in those areas and gives us a better edge flow. Gives us one edge in one vertex instead of one edge connected to a vertex rather than several. All right, so that'll avoid pinching later on when we subdivide. All right, so that was what we did there. All right, so at this point, we can thicken the object. We'll add a shell modifier. And if we do take this to 3D print, which I'm not sure I will, but we'll want, most materials require 2 millimeters of thickness. So to make that an even border, I'm going to use an outer amount of 1 millimeter as well as an inner amount of 1 millimeter. And then down here at the bottom, we'll select edges, so check that. And also check straighten corners. That part's optional, but you can see that it does give a little bit better result on the edges, on the corner edges. All right, it straightens them nicely. And if we're just going to use the object as is, then that'll give us a finer result. So I'll add an edit poly on top of that, and when I go into my polygon mode, the polygons are still selected. I can hold down Shift while I click on my edge mode, and it will select only those edges that we need. So then I will come up to edge properties and increase the crease value to 1.0. And that'll give us a nice crease just on these border edges for when I add an open subdiv modifier here. And you can see that that's creased those edges without any additional topology. And I'll give it 2 iterations if I'm going to use this object for 3D printing. If I export this for 3D printing, I'll need about 2 iterations for sufficient density. Okay. All right, well, I've switched to top view here because I just want to show you that we do have a nice square, perfectly square object here, which is hard to visualize by itself. But if we bring a box into the scene, a standard box in cube creation method, and we can just line it up to our gyroid here. I'll do it manually, I guess, and I'll just pull this down a little bit, and I'll line it up to the gyroid. All right, and you can see that the gyroid fits in this box perfectly. Once I center it, actually, hold on a second here, I'll just move it over, and you can see that the edges of the gyroid encompass this cube perfectly, and that verifies that our gyroid object is in fact triply periodic. In other words, we can clone it, and it will tile. So I'll show you that in a moment, but you could see the pattern that this creates on a cube. All right, so I'll delete that cube, and if we did want to create a triply periodic gyroid, this is only an element of a triply periodic gyroid. It's just one section, really, and I can show you what I mean here, but what I'll have to do first is remove the modifiers we currently have, go back to just the editable poly manifold here, or I should say surface, not manifold, and the edges that we created from the border, I'm going to remove those just by deleting them. They were still selected in polygon level, and I've deleted them because I want to clone this object, and I don't want to have those border edges there when I do this clone. I want them to line up perfectly. So I'm going to add, this is 3dsMax 2017, using the MCG modifiers. I'm going to add a clone modifier, 3 of them. And then on the first one on the bottom, I'm going to add 3 clones and just move them out on the X offset. Since this was created to 20 millimeters, I'll just type 40 on there, and that should line up each one perfectly, since each one is double the area of the first one. So I'm just going to each clone modifier and changing the X, Y, and Z offset to 40. And you could see that that has created a triply periodic, perfectly aligned gyroid here. Okay, so this is all clones of the original. Now, if I wanted to 3D print this, my procedure would be the same as before. However, I would operate on all of the clones rather than just the one object. So I'm in border mode, and again, I'll box select all of the borders here, and holding down Shift, I will go to vertex level and Shift click on Weld to bring up the caddy, and do the same welding procedure. 1.1 looks like it might have done the trick, so I'll accept that, and these should all be welded together now. Okay, now again, I'll go in border mode because I do want to add that that extra border edge of new polygons. So I'll bring up my scale gizmo, hold down Shift, and create some new faces from those border selections to help with the subdivision and the shell modifier. All right, and I'll just bring it out a little bit. I don't need that much, so I'll just bring out a little bit here of some new faces, and you can see again, if I zoom in here, how that's corrected those points. Okay, all right, so now this again is one solid object. I'm going to collapse the stack before I add a shell modifier. The shells retained the previous settings, so we're all good there. All right, it's 2 millimeters thick altogether. Select edges and straighten corners is ticked on. All right, so I'll add another edit poly on top of this like before. Go to face mode, and then holding down Shift, I'll jump immediately to edge mode to select just the outer edges. And I'll change the crease to 1 on the edge properties, just like before. And that'll provide the crease we need for the open subdiv modifier. Okay, so I'll just add that open subdiv. And there we go. And 1 iteration should be sufficient density if you're just going to use it for motion graphics or a render of some kind. In this case, if you go to 2 iterations, it's going to be a massive density that I don't even know if, let's see, yeah, this is a huge, there's going to be maybe close to 1 million polygons in this with 2 iterations. So even for 3D printing, I would keep it at just 1 iteration, even if I was exporting this as an STL. All right, so here's our triply periodic variation of our gyroid. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'll have many more to come. Again, I'll probably be uploading tutorials or examples bi-weekly starting now. So please click the like button and don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you.